Welcome everybody to the Maven Lightning lesson today on unlocking the hidden product executive job search market. And today we had another session earlier today. So if you had signed up for that but weren't able to join, we're going to be sharing the recording and slides for that. And that was with Somer Hackley, the author of Search in Plain Sight, which is a book that I recommend everyone read. And it's for demystifying the executive job search for candidates. But today, and this evening, we have Bobby Gormson joining us. And Bobby is a 20-year executive recruiter. He has done everything at some of the top companies across the board and has a really great experience set. He's been at Google as a technical recruiter. He was the head of talent at Etsy through the IPO, Frame through the acquisition. So he knows the internal executive recruiting game. And then more recently, he's been an executive recruiter in some of the top search firms that you probably all should know, like Riviera, and most recently True, where the smaller firm he was at, Paradigm, just got acquired by True, and he is now a partner at True Search. So I want to give it to Bobby to introduce himself. But before I do that, I'll give you a quick overview of my experience. I'm a product leader, as you probably know if you're here. I worked at Patreon, Noom, Udacity, and yeah, I coach product executives on the job search. So, Bobby, would you like to go deeper
Yeah,
into your background here?
sure. Real quick. Thanks, Colin. You covered a bit of it here, but I'll just kind of reiterate. So I've been in the recruiting world for about 20 years now. Really, building engineering and product teams for early to late stage startups, mostly here. So I'm a partner at True, if you're all familiar with True Search. So I focus on engine product searches there. Really, I have a specialty in B2B SaaS with venture and private equity backed companies. I'd say my sweet spot's like Series B through pre-IPO. And yeah, I spent the last 3 years at Riviera Partners, similar focus, B2B SaaS, Series B through pre-IPO, all engineering and product roles, pretty much VP level and above. I'll do some senior director roles as well. But prior to that, as Colin mentioned, I was on the in-house side. So really embedded in startups within the startup ecosystem, helped build an Excel-backed B2B SaaS company called Frame.io. We took them it was like 0 to 50 million ARR. Built out the engineering product team there. I was on the leadership team. We had a successful exit to Adobe in 2021. And before that, I was the head of global recruiting for Etsy. So I built and led a large recruiting team there, scaled Etsy from about 200 employees to about 1,500 employees globally through their IPO. So, I was in-house and I was a customer of all the big search firms. So I have a unique perspective as like what drives successful recruiting partnerships. Now I'm on that side. So I've got a long history here, and that's the long and short of it. And great to be here.
Great. Thank you, Bobby. And apologies, I know someone said, can you get Bobby up on screen while he's talking? But no, I just saw that right now. But thank you for the option. So Bobby's got a great profile across internal and external search. And so during this entire presentation, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. My colleague Mo is going to be taking some of your questions, and feel free to upvote them with a thumbs up emoji, and he will take some of the top voted questions and some other relevant questions, and we'll have intermittent times and breaks throughout the process to take your questions, and you can ask either Bobby or I anything you want. All right. So agenda for today, we'll do an icebreaker just to get to know the audience. I'll talk about the story that changed my beliefs about executive search. And we're going to spend the most of the time talking very tactically today about what are the 5 steps you can take to get in front of decision makers and what not to do as well. We are, during that period, also going to have time for exercises. So the biggest one that we're going to definitely have time for is for you to all write out your blurb. And this blurb is the little pitch about yourself that you can put into things like connection requests, outreach messages, and even in your About Me section on your LinkedIn. And if we have time, we'll review a LinkedIn profile live, but I want to make sure we have enough time for everybody's Q&A as well. And then I'll talk a little bit about the product executive job search program on Maven that I'm running at the end of this month. and we'll have lots of time throughout, like I said, for Q&A with Bobby and me. Great. So icebreaker, I want everybody in chat to write these 4 things: your biggest job search challenge, the role you're after, your location, and then the one thing that you would want to learn today. So let's take 1 minute to do that. An example might be turning info chats into opportunities. I'm looking for roles, VP roles at Series C consumer startups in San Francisco, and then whatever you think you want to learn today. The chat this morning was way, way more lively. Come on, folks. We had dozens of people this morning. Oh, there we go. VP CPO roles, private equity backed, mid cap, SaaS companies, remote or SF. All right, coming back from parental leave break. That's a very common one. I've seen a lot of those these days. People coming back from different types of breaks. Uh, turning info chats into opportunities. Director of PM in Toronto, Canada, and how to turn info chats to ops, like you said. Aligning my skills and level with the appropriate companies and roles. So seeking director level product role at a late stage or public company in Chicago. Let's see. Finding director and exec roles, Bay Area. Tips to figure out these roles. Getting desired interviews. VP and SVP roles at publicly traded companies. Let's see. Finding awesome roles in my industry. Interesting. So a lot of finding difficulty, let's see, in getting replies to cold emailing. We'll talk about that definitely today. And getting on the radar for roles never listed, coming off sabbatical. Another VP director plus at B2B and B2B to C. All right, great. A good mix of folks in here, but most people here are senior product leaders, which is great. And we're going to cover a lot of the questions that you have there, but it's good to see what people are coming here for. I've had 2 outreaches in the past few months that I think show the 2 different experiences people have when they're trying to network on their executive job search. So I posted, as most of you know, a bunch of articles this year about the executive search, and it brought a flood of people who didn't know anything about it into the market. And they approached it, a lot of them approached it by just going and reaching out to a bunch of executive recruiters. And so this former VP of product at Salesforce in a Series F unicorn sent me this message, which is, I followed the playbook and now have a dozen interviews lined up. Great job and much appreciated. And this is great. And I ended up coaching this person. But I also got this from a senior vice president this last week, which is, I've reached out to all the executive search companies you posted about through email and LinkedIn and followed up multiple times. Unfortunately, not one of these companies acknowledged my outreach or responded in any way. And I talked to this person at length after this, but the gist of it is that they had the wrong strategy. They had some misconceptions we're going to clear up about executive recruiters, and they didn't really tailor what they were doing to who their audience was. And so we're going to spend a lot of today tactically looking at what that looks like. And there's no one size fits all way to do this. It also depends a lot on who you are. Like I said, this other person was a VP of product at Salesforce and a pretty well-known Series F unicorn, and this person was a senior vice president at mid to okay branded company. But this comes to mind. This is a movie called Headhunters, a Norwegian film starring, which has Viggo Mortensen from Lord of the Rings fame in it. But this scene really caught my attention. This is a headhunter and a CEO. So the CEO is saying, like, I've got all the credentials for the job. The headhunter is like, yeah, you're the most qualified for the job, but you're not going to get the job. And so the CEO is like, what? And he said, my God, you applied for it yourself. You didn't, you should, what you should have done instead is pretend you weren't really interested and get someone to give a tip that, like, hey, this person's really great, and get you a referral in and try to have them kind of want you a little bit more. It's an extreme version of what the reality is, but one of the point of this entire segment was him saying that the artwork that's on the wall behind him is costs as much as it does, not just because it's a good piece of art, but because of its reputation. And so that's what he's saying he sells, is reputation. And this is a big part of your search as a leader and how it's different versus when you search as an individual contributor. And how this manifests is in what you should be doing when you're doing your job search. And so I coach, like I said, product executives, and what they should do is about 75% networking, and that includes some semi-cold outreach, but outreach with some warm connection, right? Actively going and finding connections into things. And what they actually do is about 10% that and a lot of cold applying, cold DMing people with templates, that type of thing. And it's just completely backwards at this point in your career. And the reason they do this is because, like a lot of you have suggested, a lot of the job market is hidden right now for executives, especially as you get up to the most senior positions, CPO, for very good reason. Things have to be confidential at the top level. And honestly, the hiring managers only want to see top 5 to 10 candidates. So there, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can screenshot this and it's going to be available in the recording. There are tons of ways for you to network in a reputation first way, meaning not just by cold emailing. So getting referred is an obvious one. Being memorable to recruiters in your first interaction while you're on the job so that later they remember what you're good at and that you treated them well so that they might actually think of you when a job opportunity comes up. Trying to give referrals as a like added value to the people you're talking about, and honestly, like some of the basic ones that you can't change, like working at top companies in a particular domain, right?
Right.
The reality is to be a top person. That's it. So I wanted to ask Bobby here this at this break. Um, you've been in search for so long. How important is reputation in someone searching when they're in a leadership role?
Yeah, yeah, good question. I mean, like, sure. I mean, it matters to an extent, but even if you feel that your reputation is really not where it needs to be, or there's still plenty of opportunity to bolster it. And I think it's a perfect sort of. I can let you behind the curtain a bit here, and there are ways to bolster that reputation. And we're going to be talking a lot about interacting with search firms, interacting with recruiters, building relationships with recruiters. And I'll let you know. I mean, every interaction that you have with an executive recruiter is tracked. Okay. It's tracked within their system. All firms take notes, whether it's an associate, a principal, a partner. We all take notes, and these notes are going to live with your profile within the system. Okay. And companies like Riviera, where I was, and True, they pride themselves in the amount of data that they have. It's really a selling point for us as we're trying to bring on new clients to say like, hey, we've talked to Colin, we've talked to Mo, and here are the notes that we have on these candidates, and I realized this head on. So now I'm a true employee at this point. And many years ago, I was a true candidate. I was actually in process with a true opportunity, and I realized, I have access to my profile now. So I saw everything I talked about in 2015, all of the notes that these recruiters took on me, and I was like, it was sort of eye opening. I was like, wow, right? And that reputation lives within these search firms. Yes, it lives within True, but these True, if they're sharing with their network in Riviera, if they're sharing amongst their peers at one of the bigger clients, bigger firms, your reputation is going to follow you along. So I think if you don't feel that it's there now, just know that you're going to be talking to recruiters, and things are going to be tracked. So does that make sense to everybody? Just make sure you utilize the time with your recruiters properly. You make sure you make sure you highlight the impressive sort of quantifiable results, because those are going to live with you internally in these systems.
Yeah, great point. And we're going to talk a lot today about what to do when you're on an active search, but if you're still in the job, and even if you don't have, if you get inbound from a recruiter and it's not quite right for you, it's still an opportunity to start building that relationship with that recruiter. So,
Yeah,
if you're rude to that recruiter, that negative relationship sticks around with you too. There are notes on that too. That recruiter
without a
also will
doubt.
go to other firms. Yeah, right. Uh, but it's an opportunity for you to be known to that recruiter, to be kind, to offer your network to them as well, right? Like
Exactly.
you might say, "Hey, I'm not great for this, but let me hear about it. I'll get to know you, and maybe I know some folks." And that's a
Yep.
great opportunity for you to get in front of that recruiter. And maybe even a few weeks from now, I've seen it happen where that recruiter comes back to you and says, "Hey, there's this other opportunity that is actually probably good for you," and they will remember that you helped them. All right. Any questions from the audience, Mo?
Just one. What kind of signals or information do you track and, you know, maintain in your database or whatever about the people that you interact with?
Yeah, I mean, you name it. So if we've got, a client that's looking for sort of a culture fit or somebody that's looking for mission-driven opportunities, it can get as granular as just, consumer opportunities or B2B opportunities. Really, it's as much information that we could gather in the 30 to 45 minutes that we're meeting with you. Okay. And I think we're going to do our best to try to drag out those, like, as I mentioned before, like highly impressive, like quantifiable results that you've had in your different roles to really just, get the bullet points together so we can share those efficiently with our clients. But these conversations could ebb and flow, but I can tell you this, we do have an agenda when we come in there. We want to, get the key points out of your background, not just to hear what you've built, but what was your contributions and what were the results, right? So I think pretty broad answer. It could go any direction, but if you look at myself, I want to get, what have you done? Where were you, during this process? How much did you drive revenue? Did you move this from a single product offering to a multi-product offering, right? So
Mhm.
it's all of that. And honestly, we can only track so much, but if you're super affable and friendly and nice, that's going to get right in your profile. If you're short and curt and sort of just like dying to get off the phone, that gets tracked as well.
Yeah. Even if you're unresponsive, if you never even answer the message in the first place, that also comes up. So, all right, there's a few other good questions in there, but I want to keep it moving along to some of the tactical stuff, but we'll come back to those questions at the next break. All right, so the 5 steps to get in front of decision makers. So the first step that you probably should take is the first exercise we're going to do today, which is to craft a compelling, what I call an executive blurb. Blurb is a funny word for something that you put executive in front of, but the point is that this is the like concise version of what is unique about you that answers a whole bunch of the checklist items that an executive recruiter is looking for. And we're going to put this in front of Bobby too. So he's going to be able to add some color. And there's obviously no one size fits all to do this, but I'll give you some good examples. And we'll also give you the opportunity to write your own. Second, we're going to go into how to use your network for warm intros, not just to executive recruiters, but obviously into the companies themselves. Third, we'll talk about how do you engage with executive recruiters, warm outreach and cold outreach. Step 4, we'll talk about connecting with VC talent partners pretty quickly. It's pretty similar to executive recruiters. There's just one slight nuance. And then step 5, how to network with target company contacts. We won't really go deep into this, but it is the 5th step. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew it. And if we have time at the end, we will pass the, like, including the Q&A, we will make sure that we talk a little bit about what do you do once you're on a call and how do you interview well? Because Bobby has some really good insights there as well. All right. So these are all ways to get in front of executive recruiters. Usually, typically, even if you apply to a role cold, if it happens to be public, you often will get rerouted to the executive recruiter if they're a retained search. Is that right, Bobby?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you craft your executive blurb? So I'll give you an example. This is based off of a real person that I've interacted with recently. And these blurbs can show up in messages. They can show up on your About Me, and you just have to massage them up or down in length and in style, depending on the context. But a short version for this person would be they're a senior director of product with 12 plus years experience in B2B SaaS, led LLM powered products at Twilio and Dropbox, managing teams of 30 plus across US and EMEA, with GM style experience scaling from 1 million to 50 million ARR. And I'll break that down in a couple of slides, but you can see there's a whole large density of information in that blurb, right? But a lot of it's there for a very specific reason. The long version is 12 plus years of product leadership experience in B2B SaaS, specializing in LLM powered applications and scaling products from 1 million to 50 million plus ARR. Have launched second products and business lines in a GM style capacity and grew teams from 5 to 15 plus PMs, including people leaders across multiple geos. And then very specific bullet points about some of the things they did at their companies, not just, hey, I launched this product, but I helped drive 40% year over year revenue. Bobby will probably have follow-up questions to like, what was your contribution to that? But having it there is important. The annual, how much ARR they drove. the fact that they led Dropbox Paper from beta to public launch as a group product manager. You'll probably have background questions for that, like what role did you play versus others? But at the same time, it's still an impressive feat and it has measurable and tangible things that the recruiter can bring back to the hiring team. Um, and then as first product hire at Airtable, it's actually important sometimes to pull in some of the impressive things early in your profile to show like how you've progressed. And very often, the higher up you go as a leader, some companies like the fact that you have that like hands-on ability. And so showing things early in your profile and bringing those in as well can actually be very helpful, especially if it's as impressive as something like this. So again, I'm not going to go into all of these different things, but these are a lot of different dimensions, and you shouldn't use all of them. But here are a whole bunch of different dimensions that you can touch on when you're creating your blurb, right? So these are some of the ingredients. But before we go into having the audience create their own blurbs, I'd love to hear from you, Bobby. When you are hearing someone's story or seeing an about me for the first time, what are the things that you're looking for as an executive recruiter?
Yeah, great question. I've worked in a wide range of product leadership roles, right? And you've got, product leadership roles at like dev tools companies where it's like it's going to be more of a technical lean, right? And then, I was at a company called Frame.io, which I mentioned before. We were always looking for product leaders who have a keen eye for design, right? So we get these requirements, and then we, when we're out looking at candidate profiles, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what is the archetype. Okay, I'm trying to sort of decipher. Hey, it sounds like this could be more GM related. They've got a Stanford MBA. This is a business focused PM. Oh, but they've done some work in UX as well. So I'm trying to wrap my head around the archetypes, right? Because the worst thing we could do as recruiters is present a non-technical PM to a super technical opportunity. So just to put a kind of a bow on the executive blurb, I would also add, your archetype. I'm a, technical design focused product leader, right? I think that would just make people like myself make our lives a lot easier. So that's when I'm reading those blurbs, that's what I'm trying to formulate in my mind.
Yeah, well, it's great you said that. I do have archetype here on the list of ingredients,
You
and
sure
in
do.
fact, yeah, and I wrote an entire guide on this, so it's actually going to be linked here, and you can just find it on the Top Tech newsletter if you're listening. Um, I have also a interactive quiz, so you can find out what your product leadership archetype is through a multi-choice quiz. But there's more to the archetype there. There's a lot about like what's your product culture fit and things like that, which you can also leverage for creating your blurb. So I recommend that. All right. So I did want to say here, this is a highlight of some of the important things. So your title, like just showing what level you're at is important. We talked about some of the things here, like your domain market, some of your specializations. If you do have brand names, Twilio and Dropbox are obvious brand names. They're very easily identifiable. Don't always assume though that people know how successful and what your companies are in. So feel free if you have more space or in your LinkedIn to tell them and don't make them do the research. And then numbers, wherever you're able to have numbers. And here's the GM style there. There's a little bit of the archetype sprinkled in there. Again, use specific metrics and achievements, highlight the transformations you typically drive. So saying, my company is a $100 million unit, or like my unit's $100 million, but what did you drive? Did you drive it from 10 to 100 when you owned it? Did you grow your team from 5 to 10, or was it already at 10, right? Like that's a very big difference. And you can also do this with the qualitative. So I usually help companies when they have their first product, they're like hitting an inflection point and they really need to launch their second business line or their second product. If that's your specialty and at that transformation, and typically product leaders are hired at these kind of inflection points, the easier you call that out, the easier it is for an executive recruiter to find you. So let's do this little exercise here, and then we can get Bobby to give some feedback on them. We'll give you 3 minutes. So grab a pen and paper, or if you're old fashioned, or type it up in the chat and send us your little blurb here. And don't worry, it's a no judgment zone. This usually takes actually many, many tries and like several hours, like at least an hour or two with some of my clients. So don't worry that it's not going to be perfect, but it's a good opportunity for you to start applying this. So here we have 3 minutes here. And I'll try to stay silent during that 3 minutes. See some early ones coming in. Three minutes is a long time to stay silent. I realize this. So I'd like to actually hear from the chat if you aren't engaging in this yourself. What do you think is the difference between Sean and David's here? Type in if you have any thoughts on what are some of the pros from each of them, and what are some of the things that we might change. All right, we're getting a bunch more in here. Thank you, Reba. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sean, and Prab, and Michael. We got about 24 seconds left. Thanks, Ryan. I like the idea of pointing out what you want to very specifically with values-based organization. I like that specificity. All right, we're at time. So feel free, if you are still writing them, to put them in. I will look at them later as well. But Bobby, are you seeing any patterns here in what people are doing well? Some patterns that you might give adjustments to?
Yeah, I mean, just at a high level, I mean, that looks like we're following some of your reverse engineering tactics here. I've got, years of experience. We're delineating, B2C versus B2B. I love I'm seeing a little bit of a mix of that 0 to 1 and big company experience, which is what a lot of companies really appreciate, because it just tells you sort of, this person, maybe has cut their teeth at a bigger company, but they're scrappy enough to get hands on, right? With the 0 to 1. I'm seeing some archetypes. Again, I'm a sucker for the archetype in that first line. But yeah, overall, I've got numbers, I've got quantifiable. I mean, maybe a little bit more of like what, okay, I'm seeing some of it as far as like maybe some people could add like where they had contributions into driving that innovation.
Mm-hmm.
That could work. Overall, generally a mix of some good information.
Yeah,
I like it. I haven't seen one that I
good.
haven't liked yet. Some that
That's good.
need some numbers. And some people have noted that they wanted to add some numbers. I like Prakash, 30 to 40% year-over-year growth, 4.7 in ARR. I love to see ARR numbers, and when recruiters are looking, we're looking at your profile and we're meeting you, and then we're going to tell your story to our clients, right? So any anecdote, any numbers, any quantifiable, achievements that I can actually, take in and then sort of regurgitate to my client is going to be super helpful. But I'm seeing
Yeah.
a good mix.
I find there's three very tangible things you can take back to a client, right? It's usually brand name company, numbers, and quantifiable achievements. And third is like some very obvious product launch or some very obvious like big shipped thing. But I have seen some folks who have struggled with those, where, for example, they're in a very platformy or internal operations kind of leadership role. Maybe they were at a traditional firm that's like a retailer or financial services firm, and they have a lot of the skills, but it just wasn't their firm's thing to do the quantifiable metrics,
Yeah.
or they were doing such a like internal focused platform role that there's metrics aren't really incredibly relatable, at least if there are any. So what do you suggest in those types of situations? And maybe you've done some searches where you've had to look for profiles which are harder to quantify like that.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, it's case by case. I mean, I think if we think on the inverse, when I'm coming into a role where there was a previous product manager, sort of, we're replacing a previous product manager. I think I would say, I mean, 75% of the time, the reason why we're replacing a previous product manager is because they quote unquote couldn't move the needle, right? They couldn't sort of, you know, actually, get results, right? So telling that growth story any way that you can, hey, here's where we started and here's where we finished. It doesn't matter if it's 0 to 20, 20 to 100, 100 to 4.7 billion. There's got to be, some sort of growth that shows, and some sort of progression that shows you actually have contributed to, quote unquote, again, moving the needle. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I hope so. I definitely get that. There is always a way for you to somewhat measure it, or at least show that it's tangible, or that it has a second order impact. And if you can't find a number, I find, did this help get your team more investment, for example? Did this help
Right.
like lead to some promotion? Like if you're promoted for something, then obviously someone thought you did something well in that launch, right? So I
Yep.
would lean on whatever is quantifiable, and that could be a binary, not just a number. The other thing I would say, when I'm reading through these, and I see this a lot, but I'm very glad I'm not seeing it in a lot of the folks here, but I see this a lot, so I just want to say it, is if you use very subjective language or things that could be said about pretty much any product leader. So even if it
Right.
is true for you, if it's also true for the next three people, then it's not useful. So if you're saying like you're customer obsessed, unless it's like part of your archetype, if you're saying like I'm customer obsessed, I drive strategy, like those types of things, it's pretty much like going back to your old resume and saying I'm a detail oriented person who knows Word, right? Like it's not very useful for a
Yeah.
recruiter. So I'm curious, Bobby, what do you think when you see a lot of that type of language as opposed to the concrete stuff?
Yeah, it's not telling the full story. I didn't want to, you kind of made me chuckle there because yes, detail oriented people, I'm a people person, right? It kind of brings my mind to that. I want to know what was your contribution, and what sort of, did you move the needle here? I would say it sort of, when we go through interviews, when I see interviews go south, right? It says, the person told me all of the things that were built, but I could not get this person to tell me where was their contribution. So when I see a general blurb in that manner, in my mind, I've been doing this long enough, I can see this person interviewing in that style as well, not giving any detail. Maybe they weren't, part of it. And that's something that we need to uncover in the interview. But when I read a blurb like that, to answer your question, I feel like they're not going to get far in the interview because the details are not coming through, and they won't come through when it's live, in an
Yeah.
interview setting.
So there you go. Like if your about me section at LinkedIn and your resume are fluffy, they're not going to assume you're going to give them the detail later in the interview. So don't assume
Right.
that. And I
This
like to
is
say this. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Bobby.
No, we've seen it time and time again. Great people. They have a first grade phone screen. It's great. And then then once you scratch the surface, right? And that's a saying that a lot of hiring managers say is he or she were great, but once you scratch the surface, we couldn't get any true details out. And usually if you back it up and you look at their profiles or their resumes, it's just super high level. And that's
Yeah.
sort of a red flag that we could have
Yeah.
avoided.
This should be your motto. I put it in small font. I wish it was in bigger font. Show, don't tell is a big
Yeah.
thing, because when you're on an interview and they ask you a question and you answer with a soapbox of you should in this situation, or I do usually in this situation. No, what did you do? I did this should be the beginning of every single answer, right? Like, this is how I
Exactly.
approach things. Maybe you can brand that and say your principles, but then you have to say what you actually did eventually. Okay, great. Let's move forward because there are more steps. So step 2, leveraging your network. And this is the first place I would go after you have figured out what you're positioning and how to pitch yourself, is to your core network. Who are the people you worked with who are going to be your champions? Who are the people you know who know you well enough and are good connectors? Who are other executives either diagonally from you, peers at companies who may have interacted, especially if they've interacted with executive recruiters. So if these people are director plus, they probably got at least some inbound from an executive recruiter at some point. That means at the end of your interaction, not at the beginning of your interaction, but the end of your interaction with them, it's possible that they will introduce you to that recruiter. And the closer they are to your profile, the more likely that recruiter is probably recruiting for your types of roles. So this is a great way to get in front of recruiters. And here's an example of a warm outreach. I won't go through it in detail, but I'll point out a few of the very important things that are in here. So first, be a warm human being when you're reaching out to, especially people you know. As much as they might be very willing to help you, you be nice in every interaction. Be genuine and be specific. So, for example, here, congrats, especially on your recent promotion to senior director. I'm not just template emailing you. I actually care about catching up with you. The second part here, be specific about what you're looking for. And you might even throw a bit of your blurb in, because this is someone you know well. You might not throw in everything at once until they've agreed to intro, in which case you can give them then your blurb and say, feel free to forward this and make their life easy. And then would you be open to a 30-minute catch-up call? And you can give them some other things to talk about. Another key thing I find, if you're worried about just asking outright, can you help intro me to people, is these people usually have something they can give you advice on. Even if you're the CTO of like a 400-person team or CPO of a 100-person team, there is something that person can teach you about that company, about that industry. And so if you have a specific question for them, for example, hey, you're now at Fang in this kind of role, I'm considering maybe taking the jump to big tech. I'd like to pick your brain on that. People like to be helpful, but it has to be very specific and unique to them. Another cold outreach example here for when you're networking. So for example, this is a really good hack. If you have a very dry network and you don't know any executives who have talked to recruiters for some reason, or you're just in a very niche market, and so your network isn't relevant, I like to find people who are title peers to me. So I would tell a candidate who's, for example, a CPO in this case, and they want to go into an AI SaaS company as a CPO. Well, the CPO roles, you're not going to talk to the hiring manager because the hiring manager is a CEO, right? And you don't know which company's hiring a CPO. But what you can do is find the recruiters who place people at LLM SaaS companies or AI SaaS companies by going to those CPOs who have been, especially if they've been placed in the last year or two, because then they have fresh contacts. Ask them for some career advice. Say, hey, I'm looking to go into this. I'd love to, we both have maybe a similar background. I'd love to talk to you about this. And you can give them some context about who you are. After you genuinely ask them for advice and built rapport, you can then ask them, who are great executive recruiters who even placed you in this role? Who are great executive recruiters you've talked to? Is there anyone I should connect with? And part of that is just not wasting your time talking to recruiters who it's not going to go anywhere. But it's very likely that person knows recruiters who have placed people in your kind of market sector, your niche, and know your profile pretty well, or at least the profile of your company. So yeah, I'm curious, Bobby, if you have any thoughts on where you tend to get warm outreach and second degree connections from. Is there
Yeah.
anything that's been surprised? Yeah, go ahead.
No, and I think that's great. I mean, you reach out to somebody with an expertise request. I remember when I was sort of networking, I would put that in the subject matter. I mean, people like to feel that they're important, right? So you reach out to them to I want to reach out for your expertise, and then you can sort of reverse engineer and get an intro out of them that way. I get a lot of warm outreaches from candidates that I have engaged with over the last 5-10 years. I reach out to them again, hey, Susan, I've got this great opportunity here. I'd love to network with you a bit. I think you'd be a great fit. And she'll say, hey, I'm on, timing's not right. I'm going to stay here, but I've got a really, an old colleague that I really, that I just got back in touch with, who is actually looking. And can I introduce you? And I say, perfect. Yes. If you're going to put your stamp of approval on this person, I've already built a relationship with you. I'm going to listen to you and feel free to intro. I get a lot of those introductions from people that I've previously built a relationship with. Somebody from their network has reached out, cold or warm. It's been a few years, and they got re-engaged, and then they're top of mind. When I reach out, they get the connection. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah, that's great advice. I'm not going to go through everything here, but I'll give you a preview. So when you come back, audience, to see this, we're going to go through step 3 very briefly, how to connect directly with executive recruiters. So I do want to talk about this slide, which is Bobby's actually one of the people that introduced me to like a little bit of the market map, which has kind of become popular. I popularized it. So thank you, Bobby, for sparking that idea. But do you want to talk through a little bit, like what are the differences in these firms? Because I think you've actually worked at Spencer Stewart, you worked at a boutique just recently, you worked at Riviera and TrueSearch, so 2/3 of the mid-market top 3 players. So tell me a little bit about what's the difference between these players.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much laid it out there. I mean, I would say, the big 5, these are the big 5 Shrek companies. I mean, these are the people that are placing, CEO of Walmart, chief marketing officer at Burger King, right? These are like, Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies. I mean, the big 5, it's really seasoned professional recruiters that have like 20, 30 years of experience. They assemble a massive team, and they just have years and years of network in their databases. I mean, most of the time they don't even ever have to search. Sorry about that. They don't even have to search. They just pick up the phone, and they've got deep Rolodexes of like really high level executives. They won't work on anything under the C level. Then you've got the mid market like Diversa, Riviera, TrueSearch. Those are all, we'll call it senior director and above, mostly VP level and above. Everything from like, seed companies through pre-IPO, public and private equity backed. There's a specialization. So Riviera only does product and engineering. TrueSearch does the full gamut. Diversa partners also like True, they work everything from go to market through product and engineering. So and then the boutique firms, that's just more, it's a more sort of white glove approach. So these are the people that, they take on less work. They don't just, take on 10, 15 searches at a time. They take on less work, and they have, smaller networks, but these boutique firms usually come from people from the big 5 that want to kind of branch out on their own and, work on fewer searches, higher fees, and things like that. So I would say in this big bucket here, you're looking at retained search firms, okay? And there's a big misconception as you enter the market that aside from knowing what those firms work on, you have to know that there's 2 different kinds of search firms, and this is big. There's contingent and there's retained, and they work a bit differently on how they find and present candidates. All search firms are not created equal, and I think there's an actually huge difference between contingent and retained. Okay.
Yeah.
Contingent firms, these are they're paid only if the candidate gets hired into the company. It's multiple search firms are working on the same job opening. It's fast paced. It's competitive. It's a very transactional relationship. And when you're interacting with these firms, you're going to feel like a sort of a cog in the wheel. You're just going to feel like a number in a system. They only get paid when the recruiter makes the hire, so it's high volume, and they want to present you and move on. The list that you're looking at now, these are retained firms, and I would recommend reaching out to people in all of these firms. It doesn't matter if they're the big 5, the mid-market, or the boutiques. Everybody here in all of those companies are looking to make a relationship with you. So we're paid on a retainer. So there's a certain pay structure. We get paid really we get paid regardless if there's a hire or not. Okay. So we're retained and we meet directly with the clients on a regular basis. We usually have constant Slack messages, text dialogues. We're basically embedded in the company. So we do more research, just dig in for the,
Yeah.
the best possible fit for these companies. And we reach out to warm candidates and active candidates, but we're more about building relationships, long-term relationships. You may not be a fit for this role, but I'm going to put you in front of, the next one that comes across my, my desk here. So the list that you're
Great.
looking at is retained, and those are the people that are going to give you more of a white glove approach, more caring. And, those are the ones you want to build a relationship with.
Yeah. And where on this map should people, if they could spend some of their focus? I mean, obviously, I think the biggest thing here I wanted to say was that the reality of like which firms you should go out to is you should not create a lead list of all these firms and then start cold DMing every single or emailing every single firm. You should find the person that's right for you, because all of these firms can handle pretty much any search. Like they're with some caveats, as Bobby said. But the reality is that your best bet is to find them through people, not by going to find the search, going to find the right person and going in. That should be, like I said earlier, maybe 25% of your time. But 75% of your time should be finding people who know the executive recruiters who've been placed by them, and also optimizing your profile so that, like, you can be discoverable, and investing in those long-term relationships with the recruiters who do inbound with you so that you can they'll think of you the next time it comes up. So we're already 48 minutes in, and so I want to make sure that we take time for the Q&A. You will get these warm outreach examples, cold outreach examples for how to reach out to executive recruiters. There's even a couple of examples. I have one here with a lesser known brand name. So someone who's coming from, for example, Credit Suisse, which is not known for tech, but wants to break into tech. So there are examples for various profiles here as well, and do's and don'ts. But I want to answer some of the questions. So Mo, do you want to jump in with some of the questions from the audience?
Yeah, let's do it. One question that came up earlier and got a bunch of upvotes is Sean asking, how do we find out what reputation we may already have in the system? Kind of like knowing our own Uber ratings.
Bobby, you talked about people taking notes. It's like your medical records. Are you allowed to see it? It comes with the side filter.
Yeah, you're I would say, yeah, it's I mean, if you build a relationship with a recruiter, you can just ask them, hey, what's the word internally here at True or Riviera? How is my profile, internally there? Is there anything I can do to bolster my profile with you all? It's not something that's made public. It's because it's highly confidential information. We can't make candidate information public due to EEOC and all the employment laws. But feel free to ask. If you're talking with a recruiter, just see how has my history been, and are there any ways I can improve my profile internally? But there's no way to see it publicly. It's against employment laws.
Yeah, and this brings up an interesting point, which is like seniority of people in the firm and what they do. So at Bobby, your level, you're doing a lot of client relationship work, right? And you have opinions on the candidates, but you're not in the weeds going out finding candidates, right? At this point in your career. So what I've found is that you should do a mix of trying to get in touch with partners all the way down to directors and associates, because the directors and associates, if they're early in their career, they are less able to really translate like the fit of your profile because you're just less experienced. So your profile fit, they might not be able to find those edge cases where like, how do I pitch you to the client really well? So you'll have to do more work on their behalf usually, unless they're like a superstar. And then the partners are really good at that, but the partners have less of the actual, like, I'm trying to play someone right now. I have a search. So I would do a little bit of both and make sure that you have a good mix of people you talk to. And it's because like sometimes if your reputation happens to have some dings on it or like superficial dings on it, more junior folks in the firm may take that more seriously than some of the partners like Bobby who know how to like read through, the scruff and find a diamond.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions, Mo?
Yep. Kurt Collins asks, if you reach out to a recruiter and don't get a response, should you follow up? How many times should you try before giving up? This is kind of a question about like etiquette or best practices when doing outreach.
Bobby, you get more emails than I do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can tell you, as if if I've got a product role and I'm reaching out, I'll reach out 3 times. And I would say, more times than not on that third outreach, I get oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I've been meaning to get back to you. Let's connect. Right. So, I mean, 3 is my magic number. And it's pretty much, spot on, with that third outreach. Executives are busy. Recruiters are incredibly busy. I mean, we took on this insane career. We all have our stories of how we got into it. I've been doing it for 20 years, and it's really sometimes there's not enough hours in the day, right? I mean, we've got client management, we've got candidate management. Certainly, we want to answer every inbound that comes in. I would say, 3 outreaches. I'm reaching out with apologies after that, after I get that third outreach. And it's not that we're neglecting the first 2. We may even get halfway through a respond in the second one, and then we've got another request come in and we've got to get pulled into a different direction. I would say 3, and nobody's going to get, annoyed by your outreach. If anything, I really appreciate persistence. And just somebody that can sort of spur my memory that this is a person I want to talk to. So 3, just go for it on 3 times.
Yeah.
And then,
I'll give one
and then move on.
I'll give one caveat to that. So if you're reaching out to a recruiter who very obviously in your email text that you have not done any research on this person, that you are not the right type of profile for what they search for, that you have a lot of fluff and very long emails that no one's going to read, like all of those things can contribute to someone not deciding like if they have a lot of time, they're very nice people. Recruiters will respond to even people that they don't think are great fits, but it's less likely they're going to respond to you in a busy day if you don't give them like something meaty, don't make it very personalized, don't show that you've put in some effort and have some understanding of where they're coming from.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. And Colin's got some great content here that should help. And I'm looking up at David's note there. He actually reached out with a good. I think you got me with a good. We had a good conversation about
let's read that one.
The scrubber tool.
Yeah, so David says here's the exact cold outreach I used to convince Bobby here to invest in a call with me in LinkedIn messaging. Hey, Bobby, I noticed you worked at Frame.io. I love that tool and have a patent on similar video scrubber marker tech. I'm looking to network with top product talent searchers and let's connect. Cheers. So very simple. He didn't oversell, but the personalization there, I think, probably did it, right, Bobby?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, and obviously, the higher hit rate would be more, we spend our waking hours just thinking about the requirements that we're working on. So anything that can spur like just say, hey, I am looking for a design focused, B2C, B2B2C leader who has worked, 0 to 1 and big company, right? So if you lead off with your archetype, you're going to spark you spur my memory immediately. And that's going to up your chances of a quick reply. And the retained search firms, we want to get back to everybody. There's just not enough hours in the day, and I apologize on everyone's behalf, but it's just the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the business. But keep on it, and we'll work on that outreach. Just make it super concise, to the point, and it'll work.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna just do a quick break here, but I'm gonna just preview what's in the deck that we didn't get to go to. So networking with target companies, I gave some ideas for what you could do there. How do you actually, LinkedIn profile do's and don'ts. I've thrown this in here in the appendix, as well as we were going to review a LinkedIn profile. We don't have time for that. But one thing I wanted to pitch here is I'm only gonna spend a minute on it. The Product Executive Job Search Maven program. So if you're a product executive, you're on the job search and you want to really like get started, have traction in your search, I'm going to be doing this Maven program. It's 32.5 hours of live workshops, networking, interviewing, negotiation, as well as office hours. I'm going to have guests, people like Bobby coming in, maybe even Bobby himself will show up to teach a bunch of subjects from networking, how to interview, how to put your LinkedIn and resume together, and all the way to negotiation at the executive level. And so I highly recommend that if you feel like this is going to be a big ROI for you. And so you can also get I'll have a discount code here and I'll send it in the email afterwards for how you can sign up for that. And it's from October 28th to November 28th, but it's very front loaded. So it's in the first 2 weekends and a bunch of evening programs. So for folks who are full-time workers, you can also do it. But lots and lots of self-paced material and projects so you can actually get traction on your search. So just make sure that you don't sign up if you only got you're only going to show up for the live sessions. Is going to be hard on you because you need to do a lot of the projects too, at least after the program, if not during it. Great. Any other questions, Mo, that came up in this meantime?
Yeah, we had a great question from Prab earlier. He asked, what do you recommend for someone that doesn't have big brands on their resume? You partly answered this question by saying quantifiable achievements and growth stories are really important. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah. Just we can. I don't want to get too deep into a story, but I've got a couple of different stories about how while presenting a candidate to a client, I had already really liked this person, and I knew that it would be a bit of a stretch because the name brands weren't there, but I knew that the work was there, and I know that this person seriously could do the job that was required. So this person didn't have the brand names, but what they did have is, they had videos, of them sort of speaking at conferences or, leading small sessions, within a technical conference. So live with the hiring manager, I said, hey, let's just pull up some videos. This person has a lot of content online, and, we watch them, really capture the room, really, translate highly technical information to a non-technical audience, right? And the way that they presented, their executive presence, their communication style, everything was just amazing, and it really impressed the hiring manager, and we ended up moving them deeper into process. So even if you don't have the brand names, there are other ways to bolster that, right? Whether it's articles, blog posts, interviews, share ideas, thought leadership ideas, post on LinkedIn, and of course, the videos that I just mentioned of, if you're a speaker at a conference or leading a small event, that's one way to really, I guess, gain reputation and in the world. Does that make sense? Does that sound like something doable? Not everybody's a writer, so if you're not a writer, maybe you're a speaker. If you're not a speaker, try writing. I'm more of a writer than anything, and I've got some content out there on blog posts that people can point to if I'm ever interviewing for a role.
Yeah, and people have asked me in the past, how much time should I dedicate on my job search to doing this type of thought leadership? Usually takes a little bit of time, but if you have a very specific target, like I am trying to get into this type of company, or I want to really demonstrate this part of my profile that might be a gap on paper, then becoming known for it through just writing online, researching, interviewing people for a small podcast if you want to, or running a local event or meetup. Those things can be helpful, and you do show up more. Another just hack in a LinkedIn recruiter, when a recruiter is searching for you, the more active you are on LinkedIn, the quicker you respond to recruiters' emails, the more you just open the app. But also, if you engage and actually comment on things or post your own content, you actually come up in the rankings in their search because you're more likely to reply on LinkedIn. So it's not because hey, you're a content creator that you're coming up in the search, but it's related to that. So the more engaged you are on LinkedIn, it actually improves your SEO on the platform.
We have time for another question?
I don't know. I think someone this morning asked it and I didn't answer it. And so I thought I would answer this group. Someone asked, should I have the open to badge on LinkedIn? You should not have the badge, but you can turn on open to and have it set to recruiters only. So people who only have enterprise LinkedIn recruiter accounts, definitely turn that on. In fact, when you turn that on, it actually pings people, especially if they have a third-party integration. It can actually send a notification to some executive recruiters if you happen to be in one of their saved searches. Is that right, Bobby?
That's 100% right. Yeah. It was, I've been a LinkedIn recruiter person for many years, and the addition of that was, it was kind of eye-opening. And I know it's controversial, people to say, they don't want to put that badge on, that's fine, but they do have that functionality where you can go recruiters only. And it's certainly, the algorithm picks it up, and you've got a certain bucket in a search that says this person is open to new opportunities. And to take it one step further before we go, if you update your profile at all, you get put into a bucket that says may be looking for a job. And the key indicator is they're starting to update their profile a little bit, and the algorithm says, hey, they may be looking for a job. So there's another bucket that you get put into as well.
Great point. So if you want to keep tweaking that about me section, you feel free to
I
do it.
have given that advice. Keep tweaking it.
So if you turn off and on the LinkedIn open to, does it actually send the pings again? I've heard from executive recruiters that this does work. I've noticed, I did this with candidates because I found out accidentally. I told someone to turn it off and on, and the next day he got 7 recruiter inbound. And this must be a coincidence. So I asked another candidate to do it, and then over the next week they got another like 3 or 4 recruiters reaching out where they had crickets before. So I think it works. I think that it does send the notification again. So at least until LinkedIn patches that loophole.
Interesting.
Go ahead and. Any other questions, Mo, or is that it?
Yeah, Reba asked, should you always focus on the bigger ARR numbers in your blurb? And she's asking because she's done 0 to 40 million for 0 to 1 products, but also 15 to over 50 million for, more mature products.
I'll take the first part, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Bobby. So first of all, the difference between 40 and 50 million isn't huge. So
Right.
it doesn't matter that much. But if it's like 0 to 40 and then like you have $1 billion products because you worked at Meta, or like $100 million products or $200 million, I would say both, because they're different transformation events that you could be considered for, right? So I know a CPO who has done 0 to like 20 million ARR, but it's at like a Series A B company where that makes sense. And that was a experience where he took another thing from 0 to 100 million over like 3 years. But it was a just very different context. And so for him, those things are both valuable stories to have on the profile. And they're just, you'll be caught for different, like in the web of different searches for each of them. But Bobby, I'm curious what you think.
I would say almost the exact same thing. I think there's a different inflection point, 0 to 40. And I have a role that we're working on now it's a CTO role, that this company's at 40 million ARR, and they're looking for someone to take them from 40 to 100. And the person that is in the seat now took them from 0 to 40, and it's a different profile. And really there's the way that I like to think about it is, it's like, I've been a part of it. Like, there's the first rocket boosters, right? And they're the people that get you to that 40 million or get you to that 30 million. And those people don't always translate, whether it's their choice or the company's choice, that they don't always translate to that 40 to 100. So usually they peel off, or the rollout scales them. There are some people that could push through from 40 and then, through 100, but I think it's a different skill set. So putting those both on your profile is going to tell you that, hey, this person is scrappy to get, somewhere that maybe it was just fresh into product market fit, or maybe they didn't have product market fit and they found it. And now from 40 to 100, now they know how to scale. It's all 40 to 100 is all about building for scale.
Yeah. And I think this person might've been asking, like, if I have 2 similar ones, but one's bigger than the other, like, and I only have like the short blurb to put it in, like a LinkedIn connection request. I mean, if it's both starting at 0, then I would definitely put the higher number. I don't think a series like B company is going to be like, oh, that person's too big for me. Like you went from 0. Oh yeah.
Yeah. We think 0 to 40, and then we think 40 to 100, and then we think, 100 to 200. And then it's sort of, you're at a big enterprise company after like 200 million. That's kind of how recruiters think.
Great. All right. I'm going to, for everybody's sake, because it's past 10 p.m. on the East Coast. So I'm going to call it here. Oh, someone has one last question, James. So let's take this last question and then we're going to call it. How would one represent ARR if work experience has been at Fortune 25 companies? Oh, right. Like, it's kind of hard to figure out what your ARR contribution is if you're at a Fortune 25 company. So Bobby, how would you address that?
How would one represent work? Interesting. Yeah. The number is going to be big. What was your impact? I would just say, here's what I did to either cut costs or to scale revenue from, 250 million to 350 million. You had to do something really well. So the numbers aren't going to matter. They're going to be really high numbers. I was speaking to somebody today that told me he scaled his product at Apple to 4.6 billion with a B. And I asked him directly, I was like, okay, well, what were your contributions? So I guess it just goes back to that, tell us what was the story? What were your contributions? The number is just going to be high regardless.
Yeah. And I've had a VP who was in a interview, and this was a continual feedback. They were one of those people that defaulted to soapboxing and talking about the general stuff and not talking about what they did. And they got the feedback in one of the interviews, which was, your team did something amazing, but we have no idea what you did. So I think one of the best ways to combat that in interviews is talk from think of yourself as the main character of the story and talk from a first person perspective. Don't talk from like an observer narrative view, because then you tend to say the team did this or this is what happened, as opposed to I did this next, then I hit this barrier, then I did this, and this is what the other people did in relation to me. So I find that putting yourself in the first person perspective helps with that. All right, Robert, I'm going to take your question, even though you broke the rules and came in after my deadline. I've been head of product and an exec leader at very early stage startups going from 0 to 1. Both have or were under 1 million ARR. Is such a small ARR seen as a negative? Like, should he even put it on the resume or on the LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, what did it just plateau at 1 million? Like, did you not find product market fit? Was that just the initial push of cohort customers that got you to that 1 million? I think some people would see it as a red flag to see, you got to 1 million and then you left. I think certainly, like, hey, why you didn't stay to see the fruits of your labor? Was there a reason? Like, why couldn't you get past that 1 million mark? I would just, the 0 to 1 is good enough. Yeah. I don't know if I would, I don't know that I have seen the 1 million ARR mark.
I
Unless it's
haven't.
at the
I've always
beginning.
told people to delete it. Because the point there is that what probably happened here is you didn't find product market fit.
Right.
Otherwise, you would have had more than 1 million in any reasonably like scaled venture startup. So, what you're saying there is, I spent, maybe even up to 2 or 3 years at a company that got 0 to 1, really tried. Maybe we pivoted twice. So focus then on what you did control and what you did move. So were there leading metrics like number of users or customers that you're able to do, or big logos that you're able to land? Something tangible that shows that you did do something. And you can always tell the story of why it didn't work out. And if it was bad product market fit and you ran out of funding and like the dearth of 2023, then feel free to say that. Great. Okay. Thank you everybody for joining. I've got my Maven program at the end of the month. Bobby, his LinkedIn DMs are not open to hundreds of people, but you can feel free to have a thoughtful message to him if you think it's actually going to be appropriate. And yeah, thank you so much, Bobby, for joining us.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, thanks everyone. It was fun.
Take care. Oh, someone asked when they can get the recording. I'm going to be emailing everybody tomorrow once I've got the recording and everything prepared. All right. Let me stop the recording here.